Hey guys, welcome back. Matt from BAAM Ranch. Absolutely wonderful to have you here. What I thought we'd talk about today is developing a preparedness plan. We all know it doesn't matter what the subject matter is. If you go into it without some sort of plan, you're destined to fail. I don't want to see that happen to anybody. So in this video, we're going to discuss how I kind of come up with my plan and even the way I've helped other people come up with a plan for themselves as well. Let me adjust this light a little bit and we'll get into it. And I will add that this plan or a variation of this plan can be used for much more than just preparedness. You can use it, a modified version of this, to come up with a business plan, a long-term financial plan. Anything that needs planning, you can use these same processes, these same steps in this process to get you where you want to be. So without further ado, let's jump into that. Okay, so I'm going to divide this basically into two different parts, and you'll understand why they link together here in just a minute. So the first part is going to be, we're going to start with an inventory of everything you've got in the foundational items, the 5 foundational items that we've gone over before we've beat this horse to death. And those are shelter, food and water, safety and security, financial stability, and transportation. And then after we finish that, we'll move on to the, actual developing a plan for the scenarios or multitude of scenarios or variations of different scenarios that we may come across. And I think by the end of the video, you'll notice that there's just a few different plans that you'll actually need. And you'll probably also notice that you're probably a lot better off than what you thought you were originally. So step one, we're going to start with just a sheet of paper. You can use an Excel spreadsheet. I don't care what you use. I tend to write it on a sheet of paper because I cross out and, make arrows and draw and all sorts of stuff. We're going to take a full inventory of everything that we have pertaining to our 5 fundamental foundational items. And if you're not familiar with, the details of that, I have a video posted in the playlist called Prepper University on this channel, so go check that out. So shelter, food, water, safety, security, financial stability, and transportation. Everything hinges off of these. So we're going to take an inventory. We're going to start with shelter. Well, do we actually have a shelter? Probably so. Check. Do we have an alternate shelter? Do we have contingencies for the fact that everything degrades to something that's man portable? So when we are in our vehicle's our shelter. If we're just out running around, our clothes, proper footwear, that's our shelter. If we're, in some, fantasy land of a bug out situation, or tarp or tent is our shelter. So do we have all that stuff? And then what does it take to keep that shelter running? Do you have alternate form of heat? What about alternate form of fuel? And how many days worth of fuel do you have to keep those things going? Alternate electricity. Most people, that's going to be a generator. How many days of fuel for that generator do you have? And on down to things like, whenever a tree limb decides it's going to occupy the same airspace as the huge picture window in your living room. Tarps, tape, nails, maybe a couple sheets of plywood, all of these things. Write that down in your inventory. Food and water, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to look at the stuff that's the major perishables. This is the things that you go through, quickly. They perish pretty quick. We're talking about milk, eggs, your sour cream, the stuff that we pick up at the grocery store every week. Can we list all that? And, can we get, 7 days out of that? Then we move on to your midterm storage stuff. We're going to inventory all of that. How many days of midterm storage, pantry items can we get out of that? I will add to that, a lot of people think they have, 6, 8 months, a year of, food stored up in their, deep freeze or, giant freezer. That food is only as good, is only long, I can't speak here. That food is only good as long as you have fuel to provide the electricity to keep that running. So if you have a 7 days worth of fuel, you're looking 8 days maybe that you can keep that food good in that freezer. So keep that in mind. It doesn't mean that we're under any all circumstances going to lose electricity, but it is something to be cognizant of. So after we've taken care of the midterm, what do we have with long term? How many buckets of rice and beans and, all of these things do we have? And base your supplies. Try to put the baseline of that as 3,000 calories per day. Will we consume all 3,000 calories per day per person? I don't know. We may get more, we may do less, but 3,000 calories will kind of give you a little bit of fudge space, within this planning of how many days, weeks, months, years, decades, however, far you want to go into this. It'll give you an idea of how long you have. Safety and security. This is more than just, firearms and bullets. This is also your PPE stuff, your protective equipment. This is leather gloves. This is sanitation. This is, a way to flush the toilet. All of those things like that. And it may be some sort of a mask, whether it be, the face diaper, dust mask, or, maybe it's a proper gas mask. You're going to have to make your decision on where you're at with inventory and those things. Financial stability. If you lose your job, how long can you make it? If you blow out 2 tires and have a dead battery in one day, can you make it through that? What about retirement? That's part of the inventory that we need to put in there, because there's going to come a time eventually when we're not able to trade our labor for money. Moving on from that, let's go to transportation. We've already kind of broke a lot of this stuff down, so I won't get really far into it, but just keep in mind that you have to be able to keep your transportation running, and everything degrades to something man-portable, all the way down to the shoes on our feet, or the bicycle, or whatever, transportation, little red wagon that you drag behind you, wheelbarrow, it doesn't matter. Anyway, put an inventory on all of that stuff. And this will be a running list, and it's going to be growing constantly. Things will change, and you'll have to add and subtract, accordingly. After you get all of that stuff listed, what I want you to do is go through and put a goal, put a 90-day goal and a long-term goal of where you want to be. So we have let's go with the food, for example. We can get by, say you do an inventory and you can get by for, 28 days or, 52 days or whatever it may be. Well, put your 90-day goal. Where would you like to grow that to in the next 90 days? And we've got to grow all of these, across all 5 categories. So don't get too lofty. Keep it realistic and something you'll actually be able to do. And then put your goal for where you want to be for, where you feel like you're comfortable at. For example, with me, I don't see the point in having 18 years worth of rice in a bucket, because part of this is going to be, getting, food that's on the hoof, gardening and preserving and things like that. So some point in time, and it's different with everybody, there's going to be a point of diminishing return in your long-term food storage. I don't know where that's going to be for you, and I'll be honest, I have difficulty figuring out where that's going to be for me as well. So get your current inventory, your 90-day goal, and your long-term goal. Take that sheet of paper and set it aside. This is just an initial inventory to figure out where we are currently. Now I want you to get a second sheet of paper. And this is the part where we write down every possible scenario we can think of, no matter how likely, how imminent, or how far-fetched it may be. Put on your tinfoil hat and really do a deep dive into this. What are the things that you think could go wrong that you might be preparing for? One thing we do not want to forget to put on there is a loss of our income, a loss of a job, however you sustain yourself. Even if you're a business owner, we want to put in there, a contingency plan for that. So we're talking, if you live in New Orleans, you probably better have a hurricane on there. If you live in Alaska, it probably better be a blizzard, would be part of my plan. So all different types of storms, and keep in mind that a winter storm is going to require a whole different set of, preparations than a spring storm where a tornado would come through. We get both of them here. This is, your everything, man. It's, if I can get my brain to work here, your civil unrest, civil war, warheads on foreheads from whenever, Russia finally goes off the deep end and gets their buddy North Korea. Here recently, we just had the Chinese spy balloons. What if something comes out of that? Will it? I don't know, but it's worth putting down on the list. So write down everything, and this will probably be a pretty long list. So take your time, and this may take a couple days for you to get this list together. So take your time, write down as much as you can until you've got, where you're pretty comfortable that most of the things that you can think of are on that list. Now then, we have our list of possible scenarios. I want you to go through and label them 1, 2, and 3. With 1 being something that is absolutely going to happen. It's an imminent threat. We know it's going to happen sometime within the next 12 months. After that, we want to go with a number 2. This is going to be the things that are likely to happen. They may not happen. They probably will, though. These are likely. So imminent, likely, and the number 3 will represent possible. Yeah, it's possible. Is it possible that a meteorite the size of, that's 17 miles wide hits right smack in the middle of the United States and blows everybody off the planet? Possible. Likely? Not really. So gather up the things, and you're going to have to use your best judgment on figuring out, what, category your stuff falls into. If you've got a whole bunch of plausibles on there, the possible things, and you're spending all your time on that, stop and refocus. Let's go back to the things that are imminent threats and the likely threats. So your imminent threats, these are, like us, as stated earlier, if you live in New Orleans, you're probably pretty damn likely that you're going to see a hurricane. Where I'm at right here, where I live, I may not have a tornado hit my house this year, but there's going to be one, probably multiple through the course of the year, drop down, within a 20-minute drive of where I'm at. Our tornado sirens will blow at some point in time this year. It may sweep right through our neighborhood. We may never actually see it, but I pretty well know for a fact that we're going to have a tornado come through my area, that it will threaten my routine at least once this year within the next few months. Same with winter storms. Those are imminent threats. Your likely threats, what about civil unrest? Will it affect you? And this could go, several different ways. Something doesn't have to stay in the one specific category. It can move into different levels of threat. So civil unrest, I'm about, 12 miles separated from town. So civil unrest in town may very well be a thing, and it may affect my ability to go to the grocery store. It may affect my ability to get fuel. But chances of it happening here at my house specifically, it's not too likely. It can happen, but it's not near as likely as it might be for somebody else. Your, possible stuff that's not really likely to happen. Is it possible? Yeah, probable. Maybe not. We're going to take all of that stuff and move it aside. We'll worry about that when we're done, especially if, no matter what, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. If 157 nuclear bombs go off directly over your roof, there's not just a whole lot of preparation that you're going to do to fix that problem. But anyway, once you get through all this, then start to think, what are the things that you may do? And you're going to notice there's going to be a certain set of these which require you to stay home if possible. You batten down the hatches and lock it down. And then there's going to be another set that, it's not safe here, we got to go. So there's should I stay or should I go scenarios. And once again, these can also, switch back and forth. Now, I will say, with the do I need to go and, bug out or, become a voluntary refugee, that is a whole nother video in itself, and we'll get to that, but just not in this video for sake of time. But if you don't already have a place to go, you haven't already thought about how you're going to get there and who and what you're going to take with you, it's probably a little too early in the stage to be finishing your bug out bag, because all of that from the top down is what determines what you'll need to take with you and put in your bug out bag. But anyway, we'll discuss that, in a future video. So let's focus for this video on the things that we're gonna stay here. We're gonna bug in. And you'll quickly notice, what am I going to do during a supply chain disruption? What am I going to do during a blizzard? What am I going to do if, civil unrest or, another pandemic? Well, most of these things are probably actually going to require you pretty much do the same plan, which is just a general preparedness. We already know we're going to need food. We already know we're going to need a little bit of fuel. We already know that we need to limit our contact with people outside of our circle of trust. We need to limit our time in public exposed. And most of these are going to fall under, 2 or 3 different little plans. And those 2 or 3 different little plans are just going to have minor deviations in the things that we need to add to that. If it's a tornado, we'll probably need to have a little bit more in-depth communications plan to be able to communicate with our family, friends, and neighbors. Whereas that might not be such an important deal if it's just a blizzard where, there's 7 feet of snow outside and I can't leave. Both of them are going to have the potential for power outages. Both of them are going to have the potential for, impassable streets and, inability to go out and get groceries. And, so just, you'll notice quickly, you'll get just a few different plans, and general preparedness will cover almost all of these. The ones that fall outside of that are still going to include the general preparedness, but with maybe a few extra things. We may bump up our physical security. We may, if we expect there to be, with a civil unrest, expect there to be looting or something. We may go ahead and start saying and get it written in plans. Say, okay, well, it's happening over there, but when it gets to this point, it's not worth me risking my family just to protect the stuff that I have here. And then my plan changes from a bug in to a bug out plan. And that bug out may be to some, remote property that you have, but most likely it's going to be like us. If we got to leave here, it's going to be a few miles up the road to my wife's parents' house. We're going to go hang out with the in-laws for overnight. If you live on the coast and there's a storm that comes through, you may already have a hotel in mind, that's just a few miles inland that you can make a reservation with, and you're just going to spend a couple, 2-3 nights in a hotel. So look at those things and see where each individual scenario fits, and you'll come up with a couple different, general preparedness and whatever X preparedness and Y preparedness and A and B and C. But there won't be too many different preparedness plans that you'll have to categorize these under. It sounds kind of wordy, but after you do it, you'll see it starts to make a lot of sense. This is going to take a little bit of time to get done, but it's going to almost cost nothing for the actual, preparedness plan portion of this. Excuse me, losing my voice. And then from this, we can develop our other plans, our communications plan, our bug out plan, our medical plan, our plan for how are we going to cook, our plan for how are we going to gather our circle of people that we love. All of that can spur off of this and make spider points out, and we can network and say, okay, if we have to leave and go to a bug out location, from there, this has been compromised, so where do we go from there? What are our other options? So anyway, do that. Take some time, sit down, a couple sheets of paper. It may take you a few days to kind of get everything hammered out, but once you get it hammered out, then it's really easy to make sense of this. And keep in mind, it can seem pretty difficult to formulate a plan on where to start, but that's nothing compared to the plan of where you finish, which I've never figured out. I don't have that plan. All right, well, until next time, you guys be safe.